Hello, Garland Nixon here, hanging out with Margaret Kimberly from Black Agenda Report, and we've got some important stuff to talk about. Let's talk. Margaret Kimberly. Margaret Kimberly is the editor and chief column and a columnist at senior columnist, I guess is the way to put it, at Black Agenda Report. That's blackagendareport.com. They got a lot of great articles. They've got a lot of great stuff. They do a Black Agenda Report radio, really, really good stuff, calling out those out there who are, giving us a phony line and trying to pretend like they're on our side and doing lots of good stuff. Africa, Haiti, South America, Nicaragua, Venezuela, you name it, they're all over it. All right, both domestic and foreign policy. Margaret has a great article, Corruption Lies, Biden's Health and Trump's Victory. Margaret Kimberly, what do we need to know?
Well, we need to know what those of us who had common sense in 2020 knew, that Joe Biden was in failing health. Back in 2020, when he ran and when people noticed that he possibly had cognitive decline, there was something, you want to be careful because I'm not a medical professional. I can't say what he has, but I can tell when someone isn't well. And they started telling us in 2020, he has a stutter. There's nothing wrong with him. Now, Joe Biden, I had been watching Joe Biden for decades. He was a senator for 20 some odd years before he was Obama's running mate, then vice president. I never noticed a stutter. So suddenly we're told he has a stutter. They get away with it. He wins. But now they have a problem based on his policies that did not help people, the genocide in Gaza. His approval ratings are low, and he looks worse than ever. What were we told? It's a stutter. And if you see a video of him wandering off or something, it's a deep fake video. Now, all this time, I had been saying that the Democrats couldn't possibly run him again. And I kept waiting. I was like, and it's very funny to me because I see these people as being very cutthroat, the big donors and the party establishment. I said, they won't let Biden run again. But, month after month goes by. They don't get rid of him. His approval ratings are in the tank. Then that debate disaster. Then they come out, the long knives come out at the 11th hour. The donors saying, if he's on the ticket, we're not giving you any money. So, of course, now he's toast. But a lot of these people, like Jake Tapper of CNN, he's co-author of a new book about, we can't believe Joe Biden's health was bad. Now, meanwhile, on CNN, he shot down anybody. He had this funny conversation with Trump's daughter-in-law. You're making fun of his stutter. And no, she wasn't. But now he's writing a book. He's cashing in on what he knew to be true. There's several books now coming out about the 2024 election, but it says a lot about the Democratic Party. It says a lot about so-called journalists who are not journalists. And it all, I believe, led to Donald Trump winning again. So I felt moved to write about this.
Well, and what's interesting, the gall of these people, that 1 minute they're part of a machine and they're part of an echo chamber. As soon as and for instance, you say, boy, that's a weird cackle that Kamala Harris, it sounds just like Hillary Clinton. It's that sociopathic, nervous laugh when they don't know anything else to do, and they just go, ah! And you're like, wow, that seems strangely inappropriate, right? And when you bring it up, then they all decide something. It's not a laugh, it's joy. Who could be against
racism? Joy? It's misogyny. You're a pro-Trumper. It's everything except the fact that the Democratic Party screwed up. They got lucky. In fact, there is a book called Lucky in Biden winning in 2020. I have to say this about Kamala Harris, since you mentioned her. I was never impressed with her. She never seemed very smart. The deer caught in the headlights look, the word salad, the whole, you should look up the coconut tree reference if you can. She couldn't even convey something simple to a group of people without coming up with this coconut tree, then a nervous laugh instead of being able to say, you know, that was my mother's homespun way of saying, get an education. Nope. She basic things that most politicians can master, she could not. But then not only is Biden sick, but there were people who, like James Clyburn, congressman, who wanted her. So he told Biden, you've got to endorse Kamala Harris. Biden does, and screwed up the plan that Obama and Nancy Pelosi and others had for an open convention, which was the only way out of what was already a big mess, was to give an appearance that there was going to be choice instead of this top-down pick that just didn't sit right with a lot of people. And I maintain it's one of the things that kept her from getting, I believe it was 6 million people voted for Biden, but wouldn't vote for her. So at any rate, it's now with the books, it's coming out more. And I keep telling people, people who are still Democrats, let it all come out.
Uh-oh.
Debacle.
Oh, okay, you're back. You were gone. Couldn't hear.
That's why they had this debacle, trying to keep secrets, which it's an open secret. People can see, treating people, you know, it's interesting to me how the Democratic Party treats its voters as if they're stupid. So first it's, you know, well, the economy's fine. These economic indicators show that it's fine. You think you're struggling? No, you're too stupid to know you're doing well. Things like that. No, it's a deep fake video. Of course he wandered. Do you remember the video of him wandering off at a G7 meeting? It was really stupid. The guy parachutes in and they're all supposed to clap, except he wanders off like a toddler. You know how a little kid will wander? And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing strange about that. And I'm like, there isn't. So, you know, when people say that vote against their interests and they're stupid and they're brainwashed, well, they're no more brainwashed than a lot of Democrats, as far as I can tell.
Well, you know, speaking of brainwash, let me get your thought on this. It's something I brought up on my show in DC one time. When it just popped into my head, but from a caller, and I'll tell you what happened. After his infamous, debacle of a so-called debate with Trump, okay, and then so within days, the billionaire donors, the rich people were like, "Oh my gosh, this is a disaster. He's got to go." They were saying, "We're going to take the money. We're not going to give any money." And I'm like, "Okay, he's gone." As soon as those rich people said, "Yeah, we're not going to give any money until he's gone," I said, "He's gone. That's done, right?" But here's the thing I brought up. I had callers. Oh, he had jet lag. Remember that? Jet lag. He had jet lag. He was that. And I said, I got a question. Here's what I don't understand. Joe Biden makes a monkey out of himself. He makes a fool out of himself in front of the entire world, right? The billionaire donors are like, oh my God, he made a fool out of himself. He's got to go. But the common Democrats on the street, the working class, were like, no, he has jet lag. That's what it was, jet lag. And I said, I got to ask people out there, do you think it's weird that the people who run the party, fund the party, and own the party, that you get no say, are all admitting the truth? It was a debacle. But they still have you, commoner person on the street, saying, yeah, it was jet lag or something. Don't you feel like a fool when the rich people can admit the truth and they still have you so brainwashed that you're going to make excuses until such time as they change him out and give you a new puppet, and then you'll happily embrace the new puppet? It's pathetic.
It is. It's very, I think it's a combination of things. The Democrats think they're better. They think they're smarter than Republicans. They think I believe it's true. Democrats tend to be better educated. I know they're the one cohort that stuck with Kamala Harris. But at any rate, So Democrats like to think they're better, smarter, more enlightened. Those Republicans, they're so dumb. They vote against their interests. How could they like Trump, etc.? The deplorables, whatever. So they are loath to admit when they've been had, because you're supposed to be the smart group, right? So it can't be that you were hoodwinked. That can't be it. I also think I think Russiagate is that's one of the legacies of Russiagate, that people were told this provably false narrative of Trump having gotten in through foreign interference. And that was repeated over and over and over again for a couple of years. And I think people, it's like being hypnotized or something, so that people don't even have a mind of their own anymore. And so they identify and being told over and over again, the Republicans are the bad people. They're the bad people. And this is the only thing we have is electoral politics. And your only choice is the Democrats. So then you have cognitive dissonance if you start to think, well, maybe there's something wrong with the Democratic Party, because now you identify with them completely as being better and smarter and the ones who really want to help you. And then to take in that these people do not care about you, that they lied to you about his health for 4 years, that they tried to continue the lie. It's hard for a lot of people to take in. It's hard for them to admit that this party, which they have elevated to, this quasi-religious place in their lives, that they did them in, that they didn't care, that they were so incompetent. The thing I still find funny is that nobody came to Biden and said, you can't run again. These people with all the money who at the tail end told him you can't run again, as they watched him decline, nobody would say anything. That I find it very interesting. And I guess to acknowledge that your party doesn't care about you, thought they could fool you, lied to you, and put Trump back in office is too much for a lot of people to handle.
Well, there's a great book, I love to read, and it's called The Confidence Game, and it's like what the byline is like why it works every time or whatever. It's really good. And I'll tell you why it applies here. One of the things they talk about that a con artist uses against it's the mark, the victim, right, is we want to believe that we're smart. And we don't want to believe that we've been had. It's exactly what you've said, right? And there are instances where basically the police come, knock on the door, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Yes, the guy that you were doing business with has been arrested. He is, in fact, a con artist. He's done this many times before. He had accessed your bank account. He was about to take all the money and blah, 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 blah. So the police come and let him know this was a whole con. This guy was taking, and they're like, no, officer, Mr. Nixon's a nice guy. We trust him. He's a good friend. They're like, no, he's got a long record. He spent time in jail as a confidant. He's a notorious con artist, blah, blah, blah. And they argue to the point where they're like, ready, we will come and speak for him. Because it is like garlic to a vampire, to a person who thinks they're smart, to admit that they've been had, to admit they're human, to admit that somebody could take advantage of them. Because if I admit that somebody could take advantage of me, if I admit that I've been snookered by the Democratic Party once, then I'm kind of admitting that they'll snooker me in a broad sense. And I've got a broader philosophical issue that I've got to address. And I think that con artist thing applies here exactly. And I think Democrats use it against them.
Absolutely. And we've also been brainwashed to believe we have no choice. And if you think you have no choice other than, Trump, look at him now with the big, I'm sure you've seen these images of him on federal buildings. You've got to put his face up there like a crazy dictatorship that we usually look down on. I just think it's funny. I don't think it's the worst thing about this government, frankly. But at any rate, People see things like that, or the jet from Qatar, which the Qataris just want to unload, which is the thing that I think is so funny. And it's a 50-year-old plane they don't want anymore. And people are horrified by Doge, by the government cuts, by so many Trumpy things. But you still think you have no alternative but to support the Democrats, that you can't even question them. You can't even ask, is this it? Is this all there is? I mean, so I think all of those things lead to people defending these folks who do not care about them. These folks who, when they get into office, don't do anything for you. Who lie constantly about so many different things, who have you believing that if you don't want to support a genocide, you've got to vote for them anyway. So in effect, you've got to vote for genocide. You don't, because the only other option is Trump. And so I that's one of the reasons I try to, because I'm green, tell people you have to ditch the Democrats, the idea that electoral politics is all you have, because then you're just the mark over and over again, election after election after election. And so it's hard to believe that you've been told a lie. And especially when they tell you, but Trump, now we're back to but Trump again. So this is all you've got. So you can't say, even if you see, people would argue with me, Biden looks okay. I'm like, what are you talking about? Or they'd say, well, Trump looks forgetful, and he does. He shouldn't be, he's too old to be president also. But this denial, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, of so many things about the Democratic Party that led to Trump being in office again.
You know, I've literally heard people say, because they're like, yeah, but Trump this. And I'm like, well, I'm not voting for him either. Right. And then they kind of stop for a second. And then they go, and I've literally heard this, well, realistically, there's only two parties, so you got to choose one. And I'm like, no, you got to choose one, because they have trained your brain to believe that you got to choose one. I've said to people, I said, when I look on the ballot in Maryland, there's the Party for Socialism and Liberation. There's the American Communist Party. There's people I don't even know. There's a party literally in Maryland called the Independent Party, right? And I said, and I see like 10 names of parties I've never heard of. The Green Party. Well, you're telling me that I got 10 names that I can vote for, but I got to choose one of the two parties? There's 8 more. I can vote for anybody I want to. But your mind says I can only choose 2. And I'll just say, the difference between you and me is you see 8 parties and your brain has built a fence around the other 8. Mine hasn't built a fence. I look up and down the parties and say, Green Party, there you go. They're Butch Ware and Jill Stein. They're saying we're not going to do genocide. I think I'll go with that one. But the mindset that politics are not policy related. There's 2 parties here, and you can't take into account policies or morals.
Well, that's true. But the other thing is, what are we immediately told? Well, you just have to be realistic. There's only 2 parties who realistically can win. If you don't vote for the Democrat, you may as well be running for the Republicans. The other thing I tell people is, do you not see the problem of depending on the electoral system for change? What did the Democrats do when they get in? It's a funny thing. I don't need a president to have his face plastered all over Washington or any of this nutty stuff that Trump is up to, the tariff, which is a disaster for the United States, frankly, and hastens the U.S. decline. So I don't need all those things, but this idea that I just lost my thought. Every moment's a senior moment for me nowadays. But at any
but I understand what you're getting at. Well, let's it'll come back.
I know what I was going to say. I got it now. But if you look at what your votes have done, if you're concerned about the rights of immigrants, for example, this all started in the 90s with Bill Clinton.
Yes, it did.
He concocted some deal with Newt Gingrich Anybody who's not a citizen can be deported for spitting on the sidewalk or anything they so choose, building up these immigration detention centers, the media consolidation, the welfare so-called reform that put people into poverty. That all came from a Democrat. Every president is loyal to Israel. Obama's
remember Tip O'Neill and Reagan. They're the ones. Let's face it. Most people don't know that because now Trump's saying, I don't know, think it'll go through, but he said we should not tax Social Security. It wasn't taxed until Tip O'Neill and Reagan got together. They're the one that's taxed it. That's Trump right. has said this, which again, I don't think these things will go through, but Trump said, yes, what we need to do is if you buy a car and it's a U.S. car, you should be able to deduct taxes from the interest rate. You could deduct all interest rate from taxes, credit cards, anything until Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan got together. And what did they say to us? What did the Democrats say to us? You know, what Deborah Wasserman Schultz said that there used to be a time when Democrats and Republicans could get together and get something done. Why Tip O'Neill, he didn't agree with Reagan, but they talked about him. And I'm like, he screwed us.
You're bragging about that, but yes, and they'll brag about it. Nancy Pelosi's like, we need a strong Republican Party, and I'm like, yeah, you need a better Republican Party so you can cut deals better, right. And you can hide behind them if they don't look so wacko. It's easy for you, but so people have to be disabused of this notion that our fate lies solely in electoral politics at all. And that's the other thing that keeps a lot of folks who should know better, keeps them in lockstep with the Democrats. And it's unfortunate that, Trump is such a whack job because any Democrat can get in and people will breathe a sigh of relief. Do you remember when the day they said Biden had enough electoral votes to win and people literally partied in the streets? You remember that? I said, over Joe Biden?
The return to normalcy. That's what we were told.
Yeah, well, it's normal, all right, for us to get the shaft.
Yeah.
But it's not anything normal and good.
Well, here's what's interesting. You also have Joe Biden's problems didn't start in 2024. They rigged the process in the Democratic Party established in 2020. And that's the other thing. They're standing for democracy. This country over there, who all 80% of the people love the leader of their country, they don't have democracy. The U.S. Joe Biden had a summit for democracy after his party. It's like, we are standing for democracy. We ain't going to practice it. Of all things, Joe, and that's the other thing. Donald Trump stole the election. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy, and you usurped democracy to get the nomination in the first place.
Yes, twice. In 2020 and in 2024, they made sure there was no primary to make sure nobody could challenge Biden, who was failing in many different ways. Then they tried to rig the system again for Kamala Harris, and it blew up in their faces. And everyone who doesn't like Trump should be angry with the Democrats. Democrats are like, the abused spouse who's getting beat up, but doesn't know how to leave. Or I'd say more like about children with abusive parents, because you're a child, you don't have that freedom to leave. But that's what Democrats remind me of, someone who's being abused and then will defend the abuser because they've been gaslit so often.
Yeah, the other thing that you have in here, and this is important, I think, and you talk about Biden pushing Clinton's crime bill to put so many black people in jail, that he spoke about a racial jungle. I mean, his history when it comes to issues of race are of hanging out with literally people who were diehard open segregationists. That was his buddies in Congress, literally people who made their mark, whose policies were segregation. Eastman, what's his name? The other guy from exactly. These people were old school, and like, we're segregationists, okay. And this is who he hung with. And now Trump's some kind, well, we got to get Biden. Why? One other thing about it. When he said the reason that he ran, he brought up Charlottesville. Yes, because when I saw those Nazis walking around, I knew you're giving 170 billion people to people in Ukraine that are covered with Hitler tattoos, open Nazis. But for some reason, and that's the other thing about the Democratic Party. You know what I'm saying? The racism of a Joe Biden, the loving Nazis, supporting genocide, and they like try to play like somehow they're the good guys, standing up for the minorities as long as they're not Palestinians.
Well, Biden, that's why Obama chose him. Only progressive. So to balance the ticket, they needed a conservative Democrat, and Joe Biden fit the bill. Although I'm sure now Obama's sorry he chose him because he could have won with somebody else. But anyway, so yeah, that's why they picked him. This history of, the person. Remember the corn pop story? Why would you tell that story about how he had a fight with a young black man in a pool? And during the crime bill debate about people who have no remorse, meaning black people, of course, who are all psychotic and all should be locked up. He was Clinton's partner in that effort. But that's the other thing that made him palatable to Obama. So they could have a real, although Obama was also a right winger, but somebody who really fit the bill, who was overt about it. And so they push him through. And then 4 years later, it's like, what was that for? And it's too much I think it's just too much for people to take. I think people are traumatized by Trump. They were the first time. Now I think they are again. But I have to say this. Democrats who are brainwashed make excuses for Democrats all the time. Well, what do you expect? They can only do so much. They're not in the majority. Manchin and Sinema, there's always some excuse.
Senate parliamentarian.
Parliamentarian who Kamala Harris could have overridden. But anyway, that's how you know that's a joke. But look at Trump. Trump is, in his crazy way, putting an imprint on the system. He's trying to change the entire system. There's no Democratic president who said, I'm going to change this system for the people, for the people's benefit. You see what he's gotten away with. Democrats don't do things for us because they don't want to. They are, excuse me, the errand boys and errand girls of the oligarchy. And that means they will not do anything that they are not told they should do. Trump is doing what he wants. And the courts haven't, I believe in some of these cases, they can be charged with, Trump or his officials charged with contempt of court. But the courts, no judge wants to be the first one to do it. So he keeps getting away with it. All kinds of things that are unconstitutional, or tariffs are supposed to be set by Congress, among other things. Congress, if Congress establishes an agency like the Department of Education, it should be Congress that says that we can't have it anymore. I could go on and on, but for better or worse, for worse, I'll just be clear about that. Trump has a vision for the country. He has a vision for what he wants the government to be. And Democrats just have a vision for being in the permanent government, a vision for the status quo, a vision for being favored by the rich people. And that's about it.
Well, I don't know if you heard Trump. Exactly what you're saying. The other day he's talking when he did this thing on the this executive order on whatever medications, whatever, right? But he said, yeah, my buddy, he's overseas in London or something, and he went to get his fat shot. That's what he called it, right? Trump, his fat shot. And he got his fat shot, and he says, it doesn't cost me that much. Of course, one of his billionaire buddies, no doubt. Over here, it only cost me so-and-so, whatever, $10. It cost me 100 times more. Why does it cost so much more over here? And I'm like, yeah, why does this fat shot cost so much over here? I'm going to do an executive order. So he does this executive order, whether it means anything or not, God only knows. But it said, doggone it, they got to pay charges here, what they charge over. Here's my point. Whether it works or not, whether it doesn't work or not, whether you agree with it or not, he didn't blame the Senate parliamentarian. What Trump has done to the Democrats is this. They spend all the time saying, we can't do, there's somebody, we're weak. We can't. The system stops us. I mean, we can't. We've got this. The Senate parliamentarian excuse is the ultimate excuse to say, I can't do anything because of the system. My hands are tied. I am the president of the United States, but my hands are tied by the system, the bureaucracy. I can't get anything accomplished because of the bureaucracy. That's their arguments, right? Okay. Whether you believe this thing will work because Trump said it or not, I guess it probably won't. Big Pharma owns everything, right? But here's my point. If a couple medicines could come down, you know what people will say? Let's say they say we're going to drop people's medications for high blood pressure and diabetes by 25%. Something like that could happen. Let's just say it happens. People think Trump did something, that he didn't sit around and say, well, I can't do this. His executive order may mean nothing. What he's done is he's shown that the Democrats, even if you don't agree with what he's doing, he's trying to do something. Democrats will do nothing but make excuses until it's time to raise the Pentagon budget, to cut taxes for the rich, to whatever the case may be. And that's the other part of it. He's shown them to be feckless, lying fools, which they are. He ain't much different, but I'm just saying he's exposed them.
Oh, yes, absolutely. He does. And, it's interesting to me that this is something people are afraid to even have a critical thought about the Democrats. People are like on Twitter or something, I'll say, it's because of you that Trump won. I'm like, I'm not that. First of all, I'm not that powerful. Thank you very much. And secondly, just thinking these things is not going to change the policies any. But I also want to say something else. You reminded me of how Democrats can be impressed with so little. So I was just thinking about Cory Booker, New Jersey senator, and his 25-hour speech. And people were so happy. And when I said, well, this doesn't mean anything, it wasn't even a real filibuster, he wasn't delaying any legislation, people got mad. And I don't understand that. On the one hand, Trump is described as this existential threat to democracy, and he's Hitler's cousin, and, he's going to be like North Korea and all of these things, the scaremongering. But then after elevating this fear and this threat, then people are satisfied with so little. And I think it's like the Stockholm syndrome or something. I don't know what to call it, that people will be mad. They're always mad at the person who points out. If I say, well, Cory Booker didn't do anything, he was texting, fundraising messages the whole time, didn't amount to anything. Oh, no, you have to defend him. Somebody must stand up. And I said, well, that's not standing up. Or people who talk, like, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, she's a talker. Every party has someone who's good with the rhetoric, good on camera, and that's the role she plays. But that's it. I mean, she's not opposing they're not an opposition party. They just aren't. And none of these people who managed to get press attention, actually, they prove my point that it's not a real opposition party, that they don't even use the bully Congress. They have a bully pulpit. They don't even use it. So.
Well, here's what I remember about Jasmine Crockett. I think it was Matt Taibbi, and he was in there talking about censorship, in opposition to censorship. And I, watched some of it, everything he said, I agreed with. And from Black Agenda Report, people like us, every time you turn around, either Google's, stopping traffic to your website, they're throwing us off YouTube, Twitter, whoever knows what the heck we're into these platforms. And Matt Taibbi's standing against it. And I think he was talking about the Twitter files, which showed the government's literally running Twitter, right? So here's a list of people, get rid of them, right? I'm not on Twitter right now, but I haven't been. But anyway, here's my point. Jasmine Crockett's job was to go after Matt Taibbi, right? So they use, and I know what it's like. She's a Black woman. So they stick her out there. The Democrats love that. We've got a Black female, whatever. So we've got to attack someone who's pushing back against censorship. There we go. So she goes out there and she's the lead guard dog, attack dog to bite to bite. They usually use like an AOC or somebody like that. These diverse group of women whose job now is to push for imperialism, and that's when I'm like, Jasmine Crockett's nothing but a tool for the empire. That's all she is. And the worst, she's like Michael Langley with this whole Burkina Faso gold. You know what I mean? I hate the word to use the word house slave. Why don't we go with house slaves? So I won't have to say something that'll get me in trouble.
House Negro, you could say.
Yeah, there we go.
I mean, yes, you're absolutely right. But, you know, it just amazes me how people think she's really doing. And then, of course, especially with Black people, if the Republicans attack them, the attack is racist. And there generally is an element of racism there. But that means you're supposed to support that person. You're not supposed to question anything because all the attacks on them are racist. And that's how they get you. But that's why you have to give that up. It's nothing but being on a fool's errand all the time, that you feel that you have to defend every Black person who's prominent. It leads us nowhere. I mean, where are we? I mean, speaking of Black people, politically, where are we now? Nowhere. I mean, nowhere. We're wedded to this party that is crooked. And that's the corruption. Joe Biden hiding his health and losing the election. It's not just ineptitude, it's corruption. But so yes, of course, and Jasmine Crockett, she's attractive. You know, she's easy on the eyes, and how perfect to have this young, attractive Black woman, well-spoken, and put her out there as fake opposition, very much fake.
Well, I'll say this about Joe Biden. You can say a lot of things about him, but his son was a very gifted artist. I mean, he got it up to $800,000 for a painting, something that, you know, looked like my daughter brought home from kindergarten when she was hand painting when she was like 5 years old. And look, here's Daddy, and I'm like, which one's Daddy and which one's the dinosaur? Right? No, that's you over there. The dinosaur's purple. That's Barney. Oh, okay. No wonder he's got 3 eyes. But that's what. And so Hunter Biden said, talk about corruption. You know what I mean? Talk about corruption. But at any rate, one last, I do want to ask you before we go, just for your comment. You know, this Michael Langley thing, they bring this guy before Congress. And he's, yes, these Negroes in Burkina Faso, they got all this gold and they don't know what to do with it. They're not spending it on the right thing. And I'm like, the words that I could use, I wouldn't even be on YouTube anymore if I started in on that dude. But your thoughts on Michael Langley? What a traitorous disgrace to his ancestry. To his ancestry, he is a disgrace. If he even has DNA, it should be erased. Anyway, your thoughts?
Well, yes, he has to turn in his black card, definitely. But that's why I was telling one of my relatives, I said, listen, when you have all those medals on your chest, it means you're not our friend. They don't give you those medals for nothing. You work for them. So if there's a country in Africa, in this case, Burkina Faso, that says, you're not going to tell us what to do, and the French colonizers have to get out, and we're not going to just let you extract gold, and we end up remain a poor country, it's that person's job, in this case, Langley, to go after him and to say he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just defending his junta. And then the next thing you know, what a surprise. President Traore of Burkina Faso killed 100 civilians. He killed 100 jihadists who are trying to destabilize his government. And those people who, on the one hand, we're told are evil, Al-Qaeda or whatever, they're always used by the U.S.
Oh, Burkina Faso army directs ethnic massacres, right? Here's what, so the armies, but look at this. Reprisals killings by Islamist armed group. Oh, so wait a minute. The Islamists are the good guys. They're standing up against somebody who killed ISIS. Well, Trump's shaking hands with them, so what the hell?
Well, that's what, and I was just thinking about Syria, this new president of Syria. First, he was a terrorist. There was $10 million bounty on his head, but that was always fake.
Remember, what was it? Jake Sullivan sent the cable to Hillary Clinton. Al-Qaeda's on our side in Syria and everywhere else. I guess so. That it should have said Al-Qaeda's on our payroll in Syria.
Absolutely, and that's what they did to unseat the Syrian government. So now they changed his name and put him on a suit, and and so now he's the good guy. He's the same guy. He's America's guy. And so that's what they do. But I have a basic rule. Anybody that a U.S. military commander, Langley's a commander of AFRICOM, the U.S. Africa Command, anyone they tell you is bad. Now, they may not be good, but they certainly aren't what they're saying.
Right.
And you owe it to yourself to, that's why we need independent media, to find out more about this. We've seen this movie. We know how it ends. When African leaders stand up for their people, for their sovereignty, for their self-determination, they get slapped down. That's the attempt anyway. Thomas Sankara, who was the president of that same country years ago, he was assassinated by a traitor. So we've seen the movie, we know the script, and but Traoré has captured public attention, which I think is a great thing. I hope people find out more about Burkina Faso, about the role that the U.S. plays in Africa and keeping African countries destabilized and poor, and making sure that the U.S. can just extract as much out of that continent. But of course, Langley, I think of Colin Powell, and people were so impressed with him, and he was chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and then he was Secretary of State, and all I remember is him lying at the UN about weapons of mass destruction. And then they fired him, which I think was the perfect ending. Right after Election Day in 2004, Bush didn't need him anymore, and they got rid of him. So if you can't remember anything else about Colin Powell, I think that's the thing you should remember.
Yeah, exactly. The last thing I said, the thing I remember is they always talk about, like, he was the good guy, the pottery barn rule that he said when they said we're going to invade Iraq, and apparently the word is he told Bush, well, you break it, you bought it, so maybe you shouldn't do it, right? And then he said, but if you need any help breaking it, I'd be happy to lie to the UN for you. Not and does that make him a hero? A hero because he said some mealy mouth. Not if they said, "Hey, Garland, we're going to go drop a bomb and kill all the black people in New York City," and I said, well, if you do that, you could get in trouble. Rather than saying, no, that's wrong, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't kill innocent people. Instead of, well, now keep in mind, yeah, fair enough, you can kill them all, but if you do, maybe you only kill half of them. It wouldn't be as bad, because if you kill them all, you might go to jail, you get in trouble, then you're gonna have to pay money to their next of kin and all. Do you really want to go through that? And if they say, yeah, okay, then I'd be happy to help you. That's nothing you should get a ribbon for.
The biggest irony to me about Colin Powell, if he had resigned from the Bush administration, he would have been the first black president instead of Barack Obama, I believe.
Yeah. Well, no, he would have been the second JFK is what he would have been. I think he'd have got the run down. He'd have committed suicide. His plane would have went down in a remote mountainous region somewhere in the,
But he went along. He was a careerist, and that's what he got.
He got lots of money.
Got war. He got kicked out when he was no longer convenient for him to be around.
They let him run the Carlyle Group for a while, or at least he was the face of the Carlyle Group for a while. So he was an imperialist, is all he was. He was part of the empire. The best you get from him, we're supposed to think he's a hero because he advised them that if they invaded a country and killed 1 million people, that they would be responsible for fixing it, when in fact they weren't responsible for fixing it. No empire does that, and they didn't fix it. So that's his claim to fame, that he said, well, if you break it, you fix it, the pottery barn. Well, this was not a pottery barn. This was a country full of 100 million people.
That's right. But they didn't count. And we see the trajectory of getting rid of the secular Arab regimes, Iraq, Libya, Syria, one by one, cozying up to these Gulf monarchs like Trump, just coming from Saudi Arabia and Qatar. That's always been the U.S. Plan, and it's been a disaster for the people of Iraq and Libya and Syria. They've excuse me, all suffered because of the U.S.
Well, I'll say this: they've kicked a lot of people around, but didn't work so well with the Houthis. Didn't work so well with the Houthis, did it?
My people, the Houthis. Ansar Allah, yes, they've been like, oh yeah, well, whatever. And they've been losing ships and losing drones, and not losing ships, but a plane. They lost the plane; it fell in the water because they're trying to avoid the drone. I love it. Yemen's like my favorite place.
All right, Margaret Kimberly, check out her website. It's great. It's called.
Wait, my book.
Ah, yes, Prejudential.
Black America and the Presidents.
Yes, there
great
you go.
Book.
You can find that. So she's got a great book, Prejudential: Black America and the Presidents. She's got a great she runs this great website, blackagendareport.com. Lots of good stuff on there. They got Black Agenda Radio. It's really good, and you'll really enjoy it. You have some great articles on there, and they do cover, like I said, they cover Haiti and Africa and all kinds of stuff. South Venezuela, Nicaragua, Cuba. I mean, a lot of stuff that doesn't really get the coverage that it deserves. So go to blackagendareport.com. Every Wednesday, the new articles come out. Thank you very much, Margaret Kimberly. Everybody, share this on all your social media platforms. Follow me on Rumble, Rockfin, all that kind of stuff. I also have my P.O. box out there, so you can snail mail me a letter or whatever you want. Thanks. We're out.